The abandoned building I looked at seemed to be bleeding. Looking down the street, I saw a few more stone structures, and they too had red fluid dripping down their dark granite. My friends and I backed off instinctively. "Maybe it's just some type of sap," Amy said, running her fingers through her hair like she usually did when she was anxious. But then, the wailing started, and we all looked at each other. I saw the same paleness and uncertainty on all their faces that I felt inside my stomach. "What's that? A fisher cat? A fox?" James asked to my right, speaking quickly, his voice quivering. He was always the natural leader of our little expeditions, the one who did the research into the abandoned sites or caves, and encouraged everyone else to come along. But right now, he didn't look like much of a leader. His eyes were wide, his skin was pale, and he was quickly looking around to the right and left. I knew how he felt. "That's no fox," I said, feeling around in my pocket for my knife. The wailing seemed to come from all around us. It sounded like a woman being burned alive. The fourth member of our group, Sarah, was the only one who seemed to not be in a state of mortal terror. She calmly looked at the blood dripping down the buildings, walked up to it, and sticking her fingers into it, then smelling it. I thought for a moment she would taste it. Thankfully, she didn't. She wiped the blood off and turned to us. "Yeah, that is blood," she said. "I think we need to get out of here." Her calmness seemed to bring the group back together for a moment, and we all looked at each other. I took out my knife. I looked over at the old church at the beginning of town, and saw with horror that it was absolutely covered in blood now. Every floorboard and wall and beam on it sweated the dripping red fluid. It looked like a shimmering flowing maze of dark crimson. It soaked the dirt and the grass growing around it, dripping down from every surface. "If any of you have weapons," I said, "it may be a good idea to take them out now. We don't know what is around us, but it's better safe than sorry." Sarah nodded in agreement, pulling out a keychain with mace on it. James had a box cutter, and Amy had absolutely nothing. But she went to the side of the dirt road and picked up a big stick. We all started walking back to the car in a tightly clustered circle. The hike would take at least 45 minutes, even if we hurried and didn't get lost. We had to follow the red trail until it intersected with the green trail. The green trail would lead directly back to the dirt parking lot where we had parked. I would be ecstatic to see those little green markers. The wailing never stopped, but seemed instead to follow us. Silvery eyes looked out at us from the mist, but whenever I turned my head to look directly at them, they were gone. They moved so quickly. I wondered whether maybe I was just hallucinating them. James was at the back of our little circle, and I was at the front. I heard a quick commotion from behind me, but by the time we all turned to look, he was gone. It couldn't have taken more than a fraction of a second for us to look back. The thick fog on both sides of us obscured sight. We heard a deep, terrified, low scream, but it was cut off by the middle with a horrible gurgling, choking noise. And then, we were plunged into silence. The wailing had stopped. "James? James!" I yelled, trying to discern where the scream had come from. There was no reply. Throughout history, there have been countless unsolved disappearances of towns or groups of people. The Mayan city of Tikal, the English colony of Roanoke, the entire Roman 9th Legion, the Eskimo village of Anjakuni Lake, and many others. One of the most bizarre and least well-known occurred near where I grew up. Sources from a few centuries ago told of a bustling community of loggers and fur trappers who had a small hamlet deep in the forest they called North Windshire. It consisted of mainly one dirt road with buildings on each side of it, but it had a church, a tavern, a blacksmith, a barber surgeon, and a few other functioning establishments. The people who lived there were, By all accounts, peaceful and hard-working. The fact that all of them disappeared one night without a sign of struggle confounded locals, and to this day, no one has ever discovered any conclusive evidence as to what happened to the townspeople. Explanations ranged from a sudden epidemic to hostile Native American tribes. A few of my friends and I went out urban exploring and cave exploring, and we knew we needed to see this place. James had brought it up, texting everyone about it, and then Amy went to the local library and found anything and everything she could about North Windshire. By the next day at 4 p.m., 4 of us were driving out there. The thick fog of early spring covered the endless forest. We nearly missed the single dirt road leading off to North Windshire, but luckily, Sarah's eagle eyes saw the faded marker as we drove past. It got dark around 5:30, but since the hike was only estimated to take 30 minutes each way, I figured we had plenty of time. The walk into North Windshire was beautiful and peaceful. We complained about our jobs, discussed other abandoned sites and caves we might explore, griped about politics, and drank a couple of beers. By the time we reached the outer limits of the town, I was in a good mood, happy to be with friends and explore somewhere new. But as we entered the first building in the town, an ancient-looking church with doors busted off and animal droppings all over the floor, an eerie feeling had fallen over me. I could see it was affecting the rest of the group as well. No one wanted to be the first to speak about it, however. Not after we had driven an hour just to see this old ghost town. Yet, when I was inside the church, I could have sworn I saw silver eyes, looking in through the broken windows. There was a feeling of immense power in the church, a feeling of something ancient and inhuman watching us, and a slight smell of sulfur seemed to cover the entire town, mixing with the smell of fog and pine trees that pervaded the forest. "Where could he have gone?" Amy asked. She was in clear panic mode. Sarah and I tried to calm her down. "We need to get out of here so we can call for help," I said. Sarah shook her head. "We can't just leave James, and you know it," Sarah said, still maddeningly calm about the whole thing. "We have to go look for him. What if it was you? Would you want us to hike out of here and call the police? It could take a few hours before they get here and start searching. And if he's in danger..." I sighed. She was right. I didn't want to mention that choking sound that had cut off his screaming, however. It sounded like something was ripping his throat out, and if that was the case, there was nothing we could do by searching. Luckily, Amy brought it up instead. "It sounded like he was choking," Amy said, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. "What if he got attacked by a bear or a mountain lion? What if it ripped his throat out? What if by looking for him, we all get attacked too?" "Sarah's right, though I hate to admit it," I said. "Even if he did get attacked, he might still be alive. We might be able to help him." We heard scuffling from our left. I had my knife pointed out in that direction. For a keychain knife, it was rather long and strong, made from Damascus steel and longer than the palm of my hand. With shaking hands, I took the key ring and keys off and slid them in my pockets, so the knife wouldn't jangle every time I moved. Amy had her thick tree branch ready. The figure broke through the fog suddenly, on the ground and dragging itself forward, and Amy and I both let out a short scream. My first thought was that it was a zombie, but I quickly realized that wasn't really true. It had a smell of sulfur, disintegration, and feces emanated from it, a smell that made me want to gag and cover my face, but I didn't dare put my hands up. Though it had no legs, it moved deceptively fast. It veered towards Amy, who was holding her branch like a baseball bat. She swung the huge thing as fast as she could, knocking the wood into the side of the creature's head with a massive crack. Its head whipped to the side, its open drooling mouth biting off a piece of its own tongue in the commotion. The tip of its tongue, a dark brown rotten thing, fell off into the dirt. Its cracked black teeth smashed together, pieces of them shattering, yet within seconds, it had turned its head back towards us and started forward again. Amy quickly backpedaled as I ran forward, stabbing the knife through the side of its neck. With a strong grip, I pulled the knife handle back towards myself, opening up the creature's throat with a single motion. It opened its mouth in a silent scream, but no blood came out. Instead, white light began to seep out of it. It looked like a thin, shimmering mist, which at first dripped slowly out of the creature's wounds, and then began to run faster and faster. The light twisted back towards the abandoned town, forming a spiraling tunnel as it veered down the path. The strange creature had lost the glow of its eyes now. It just lay there on the ground, kneeling on its stumps. Its rotting, filmy eyes slowly started to close. It fell forwards, landing at Amy's feet. "Oh my God," Amy said slowly. "What the fuck was that?" I shrugged calmly, but inside, I was just as terrified as her. I could feel my hands trembling badly. I tried clasping them together, holding the knife between them, taking deep meditative breaths in an attempt to stop the trembling. After a few seconds, it seemed to recede slightly. "I think whatever it is, it's connected with that church," Sarah said. She still seemed maddeningly calm about the situation. I wanted to shake her and ask her if she understood how close to death she was right now. And then she looked at me. "You lead the way, Dean." I nodded. "We need to get as far away from the church as we can, I think," I said. I started walking down the trail, and they followed close behind. I could practically feel Amy breathing down the back of my neck. We made good time on the trail. We each had flashlights on our phone. Even though we had no service, the presence of the phones and the bright LED lights they provided made me feel quite a bit better. It seemed to connect me back to the real world, a place of technology and 911 and science, rather than this trail of silver eyes and bleeding churches. But after hiking for 45 minutes, I knew there was a problem. The hike was only supposed to take 30 minutes each way. Going in, we hiked the green trail for about 10 minutes, which intersected with the red trail. We only had to hike about 20 minutes on the red trail to reach the town. We had stayed in the town longer than we should have, and it had gotten dark. But since the trails were clearly marked and we had lights on our phones, we hadn't been worried. Now, I was extremely worried. It would have been nearly impossible to miss the sign and the big marker on the intersection of the trails. Even at nighttime, I knew we hadn't passed it. It seemed impossible, and none of us wanted to break the silence. Eventually, however, I did. I turned around. "We're lost," I said simply. Sarah and Amy shook their heads. "Do you think we should turn back around?" Amy asked, nervous. Her eyes flitted from me to Sarah rapidly. "And do what?" I asked. "It just leads back to the church. We're trying to get—" Sarah interrupted me, pointing suddenly. Guys," Sarah said. I turned around so fast I almost fell over. I saw where she was pointing with her cell phone light, and I wanted to start crying. It was the church. We had somehow done a full circle and came back to the abandoned ghost town. This was, of course, geographically impossible. The red trail did not circle back around. It continued in a relatively straight line to the east. And yet, here we were, back where we started in the pitch black night. Then the singing started. It reminded me of a church hymn, but it was eerie, off-note, slowed. It was like a church hymn from a bad acid trip, and as I saw lines of silver eyes walking down the street, I realized where it was coming from. "Quick, around back," I whispered, pointing to the church. We sprinted around the building, hiding behind it, though careful not to touch the exterior itself, which was still swam with blood. Sarah and I poked our heads out to watch, while Amy hyperventilated. hugging her branch to her chest, looking into the dark bushes suspiciously. We had all turned off our lights by this point, but the moon gave off a little light, enough to see vague silhouettes anyway. The smell of the creatures walking down this eerie abandoned street was overwhelming. The smell of the blood from the buildings, mixed in with the rotting sulfurous reek that now overpowered us. I saw many of them had pieces of their faces, arms, and legs missing, as if a leper colony were marching past us. But no blood ran from these wounds, and the light in their eyes seemed to come from within their bodies. They weren't simply reflecting the moonlight, but emanating some dead light from within themselves. It was disquieting. When I turned to look away, I realized Amy was gone. I shook Sarah quickly, who seemed to come out of a trance. "Amy," I said, simply pointing. She turned, and her eyes went wide. "Where the fuck is she?" she said through gritted teeth. I tried squinting into the bushes, but it was too dark to see anything. I swore under my breath. "We're going to need the lights, Dean." I nodded, though a pit of dread formed in my stomach as she spoke the words. "If those things in the road see our lights..." She turned her light on, covering most of it with her hand to try and make the beam smaller and less noticeable. Her mouth opened in a silent scream, and she nearly dropped the phone. I looked down, following her gaze. 10 feet into the bushes, we saw Amy. Her head was on backwards. Her neck snapped. The skin stretched into a tight circle. Her mouth was still open in horror, her eyes wide and unseeing. "Oh God," Sarah said, and for the first time, I saw her calm, cold demeanor shatter. She was breathing fast, bent over, repeating those words. "Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God." "It's okay," I said, taking her hand gently. I covered her light up with my palm, then turned on the screen and turned it off. "We're going to be okay. Don't fucking lie to me with that bullshit," she whispered angrily. "We are definitely not going to be okay. Do you see her? Look at what they did to her." "We can't give up hope," I said. "We need a plan. Our plan should be to burn that fucking church down and kill all those bastards," she whispered. I nodded. "I like it," I said simply. "That is a great plan." I peeked back from around the corner, trying to see if the creatures with the glowing eyes had gone away, and to my horror, I saw one of them standing inches away, watching us and grinning from ear to ear. It showed off blackened teeth and squirming brown gums in its Cheshire cat grin. I involuntarily yelped and stumbled back, falling over a branch, dropping my knife and phone when I hit the ground. Behind that one stood dozens more, all smiling wide, watching Sarah and me with their dead glowing eyes. I began to fumble in a panic on the ground, looking for my knife and phone. I found my knife, but my phone was nowhere that I could see. For a moment, time seemed to stop, all of us frozen like statues. The creatures smiling with their insane expressions on their decomposing faces. Sarah flicked her mace to the firing position and began shooting it at the creatures' faces. At first, nothing happened. Then a bellow of rage began. Each of them that had been hit began to mutter. It didn't sound like words at first, but it grew louder and more angry with every passing second, until it turned into a shriek. All of their grinning mouths turned to open, furious screams. They began to run forwards. I was out of time. Grabbing my knife and leaving my phone, I got up, sprinting into the forest. Sarah wasn't so fast. By the time she had turned to flee, their dead, rotting hands had already grabbed her. Her screams of pain followed me out into the darkness, echoing and growing more animalistic. Then they were cut off, and I was alone. I ran in a straight line for a few minutes, cutting myself open on prickers and falling over branches and smashing my knees on tree trunks. I was battered, bloody and hurting. Eventually, I found a huge rock with a small opening underneath it. I crawled under it, hiding, thinking. Sarah's words came back to me. Our plan should be to burn that fucking church down. Hell, they were her last words, her dying wish. Eventually, I crawled back out. Feeling in my pockets, I found a lighter. I limped painfully back towards the abandoned town, back towards the church and all those murderous creatures who called it home. As I got close, I could hear those eerie hymns stretching out through the forest, distorting and echoing. I crawled to the back window, and what I saw there will give me nightmares for the rest of my life. They had the bodies of Amy, Sarah, and James crucified against the front wall. A figure in a black robe was cutting out pieces of their bodies and feeding them to the congregation. One by one, the creatures with the glowing eyes would go up to the front, where the robed figure would use a knife to rip off a piece of skin or muscle from the dead body and feed it to the open, rotting mouth of the kneeling creature. They all lined up, and soon, the bodies of my friends were skinned, the bones and organs showing as they mutilated each other and fed them to the crowd. I felt like throwing up. I backed away from the church quickly, trying to form a plan. I stumbled around, looking for a thick branch. I found the one Amy had been holding behind the church. Next to it, I saw Sarah's can of police mace. Grabbing both, I snuck back up to the front, and I shoved it through the handles of the church door as quietly as I could. I started a fire in the town, destroying the church first. The weather was dry, and it was fairly easy to get it started. I used dry leaves and twigs, piling them up in the corner of the building and lighting a few leaves to get them started. The fog was thicker than ever, and the darkness was starting to come in. I could only hope someone would still be able to find me. I let the fire spread, starting new ones at each of the buildings I passed. Hissing and whispering came from the shadows all around me. I used Amy's mace to stop one of the crawling, biting creatures, who had only one leg and was dragging himself around, leaving trails of blood behind him. As the flames grew higher, more creatures came out, and soon I had to abandon the town entirely, but they were following me closely. I sprinted down the trail, continuously looking back. Silver eyes glinted in the night. I was grabbed from the bushes and trees repeatedly, rotten hands shooting out to stop me from escaping. The hands were cold, and the skin felt loose on them. It was as if in the process of decay, the flesh had started to separate from the bone. When I ripped free from the last one, most of the skin came with it, revealing brown fetid muscle underneath, squirming with worms and insects. But looking back into the forest, I could see flames high in the sky now. I knew it would only be a matter of time. I sat on the trail, a knife in one hand and the can of mace in the other, and waited. Soon, I heard voices, human voices. They were coming from farther down the trail. Seconds later, I caught my first glimpses of firefighters in reflective suits. I started shouting and waving my hands. Weak, dehydrated, and terrified, I was quickly ushered out of there. They brought me further down, and I realized the branch of trail that led back to civilization was here again. I nearly cried in relief when I saw those green markers along it. Finally, I had broken the loop. With help, I made my way to safety, the sole survivor of a trip to hell. After my parents had moved to a new town, I was forced to make friends all over again. It was my last year in high school, and I didn't know anybody. I ended up finding a crowd of kids who liked exploring abandoned buildings and smoking weed. There were worse fates, I guess. It was far better than being the new kid with no friends at all. I found the old house on the edge of town, far down a dirt road that seemed to serve no purpose. I was riding my bike at the time. The next day, while we were at school, I reported back to my friends about it during lunch. "We'll go tonight," Mike said, grinning at me. "Steve always finds the most random crap," Howie said, looking down at his tray. "Remember the time you found that underground tunnel in the mental asylum?" "Yeah," I responded. "That was pretty bizarre." But this new house would be far stranger than anything before. 4 of us ended up going. Mike was always the leader, and also the only one with the car. His parents were wealthier than any of ours and had bought him a Cadillac on his 16th birthday. He was also the giant among us, standing well over 6 feet tall. Howie was chubby and short. He was always cracking jokes at the worst possible time and getting in trouble, but I loved having him around. He was always in a good mood, always trying to raise everyone's spirits. And then there was Lillian. She was, by far, the smartest among us. She came out with us sometimes, always wearing goth clothing. This week, her hair was dyed black with red streaks down it. Next week, it would probably be something totally different. We pulled up in front of the house, Mike squinting at it through the windshield of his Cadillac. "Holy shit, that place is huge," he said. In the dark, all I could see was its silhouette. Everything else stayed silent, simply staring at the place. A chill ran down my spine. In the dark, it seemed far more ominous than it had in the bright afternoon. "I hope we don't find any family of inbred meth heads living in there," Howie said. "What is this road even for? There are no other houses on it. It doesn't seem to go anywhere." I had wondered the same thing. We all got out of the car, gathering our supplies. Each of us had a headlamp we usually used for nighttime explorations. Turning them on, the yard lit up all at once. In front of the house, across the massive unkempt yard, I saw a sign I had missed the first time I had driven by this place on my bike. "Absolutely no trespassing. Trespassers will be absorbed." "What the fuck?" Howie said, laughing. "Trespassers will be absorbed? That's a new one. Absorbed into what? The cosmic soul, hell, or maybe the Russian military?" I looked around, feeling watched. In the forest next to the house, I saw a pair of wide eyes low to the ground. Whatever it was skittered away as soon as I turned my headlamp towards it. Probably just a possum, I thought to myself. "That sign is likely just someone's idea of a joke," Mike said, putting his massive hand on Howie's back. "Why don't you go first, Motormouth?" Howie looked up at Mike, a look of concern crossing his fat, jovial face for a moment. Then he turned towards the house and began walking. We followed close behind him. I was next to Lillian. "You grew up in this town, right?" I asked her. She nodded. "Have you ever heard of this place? Or this road?" I thought back to the faded road sign we had seen when we pulled onto it. I think it said Gnawbone Road. She frowned slightly. "No, but this town's nearly a few hundred years old," she said, pushing a strand of hair out of her face. "There's probably a lot of places like this we don't know about. One time, before you moved here, we found an entire graveyard in the forest. The trees and brush had nearly reclaimed it, but there were still dozens of tombstones mostly intact. There wasn't even a trail to it. It was like the whole thing had simply been forgotten and left to nature." By this point, Howie had reached the house, going up the rickety creaking stairs. The front porch wrapped around the house. Old Victorian turrets stood high, blocking out the stars and the dark nighttime clouds. The peeling red paint of the house had mostly been worn away over time, leaving stained wooden boards peeking out underneath. We followed close behind. An old rocking chair on the porch, still moving back and forth. Must be the wind, I thought. Howie put his hand on the doorknob. For a moment, I hoped that it would simply be locked, and then we could just turn around and forget about this whole thing. But it wasn't. The door opened silently, swinging in. "Holy crap," Mike said behind him, looking over Howie's head into the darkness. His headlamp moved up and down as he checked out the front chamber. Look at the size of that chandelier. Lillian and I moved up close behind him and Howie. A huge glass chandelier still hung from the ceiling, covered in spider webs and black dust. Underneath it, a massive staircase went up to the next floor. Dust covered the floor. Among it, I saw footprints. They looked fresh. They only went in, I noticed. Whoever it was must have taken a different way out. It looks like we aren't the only ones who have been here, I whispered. The rest of them examined the footprints as well. Maybe it's just a daytime caretaker, Mike said. Let's go. We all stepped in, closing the door behind us. A faint musty smell permeated the house, along with something more repulsive, something like rot and spoiled meat. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was definitely there. Okay, where are we going first? Lillian asked, her voice calm and unbothered. I wished I could have that level of calm. Let's go left, Mike said, pointing. It looks like there's some sort of old library over there. Ancient-looking books were stacked in shelves up to the ceiling. Many of them were water damaged or falling apart. Lillian moved apart from us, examining them with a frown. Why would someone leave all these books here? And a chandelier? She asked. I shrugged, coming up next to her. Maybe all that stuff is just worthless, I said. And not a single homeless person or kid has come to steal all the stuff they left behind? She said. She had a good point. She pulled out a random book. Looking over her shoulder, I saw the title, Human Sacrifice and the Black Arts. The one next to it on the shelf read, The Teachings of Moloch. Pretty weird, I said. But Lillian was no longer listening to me. She had opened the book and was reading it with wide eyes. Turning around, I saw Mike and Howie had gone. Oh shit, Lillian, I whispered. We lost them. How in the hell could we lose them? They were just right here. And then I heard screaming coming from another room nearby. She dropped the book and we began to run, turning our headlamps left and right frantically. We ran into the kitchen and saw Mike sprawled across an old table, his throat slashed from ear to ear. He was still alive, gurgling, his eyes frantically moving from one end of the room to another. The table appeared to be drinking his blood. Every drop that fell on it disappeared into the wood. He began to seize, his eyes rolling back in his head. Within seconds, he had stopped breathing, his fingernails and lips turning blue under the intense glare of our headlamps. Howie, where are you? I screamed. I didn't know whether Howie had been killed by Mike or someone else was in here with us. I couldn't see how Howie would do that to any of us, though. My mind moved towards the latter idea. Oh my God, Lillian said, her hands trembling. We need to call the police. We need to get out of here. She reached into her pocket for her phone, dropping it to the floor in her panic. She picked it up, turning it on. No service. Let's just go, I whispered. You go first. I put my hand on her shoulder, feeling her chest heave as she began to cry. We need to go now. I spun her around and began pushing her towards the front door. I looked back one last time and saw Mike's body deflating like a balloon. His blood spilled out of him faster and faster, which seemed strange, since he had no heartbeat. The table appeared to be melding with his body, his head and chest liquefying and stretching out. Within seconds, he had disappeared into the house itself. All the blood and gore had been cleaned up. Even his clothes were gone. I didn't share this with Lillian. I just pushed her faster. We saw the door was closed. I ran past her, trying to open it, but it was locked. I kicked it as hard as I could, putting as much force in the area around the knob as I could, but it was like kicking a metal wall. I shrieked with pain as the force of the impact ran back up my leg. I checked my phone, my hands trembling. It said there were 0 bars in the house. I tried to send out a text anyways, first to 911, then to my parents. Both failed to send. Perhaps it was the fact that we were in the middle of nowhere, or perhaps the house had some sort of metal that interfered with cell reception, but it seemed no help was coming. Lillian began to cry harder. "No help is coming. No help," she sobbed. "Get it together," I said through gritted teeth. "We aren't dying here. We have to find Howie and get all three of us out together. Do you have a weapon on you?" She shook her head, then pulled out a lighter. That's not really a weapon, Lillian. Maybe if we start a fire in the house, then people will see it, and help will come," she said. "With us inside?" I said aghast. I don't know, she said, crying harder. "I don't want to die here, Steve. It isn't supposed to be like this." I put my hand on her shoulder. "Let's go explore and find another way out," I said. Then I thought of the windows. Maybe we can smash our way out of the windows. She perked up at this. There was a fireplace in the library. I think there was an old fire poker set next to it. We could use it as a weapon or smash the window out with it. We both ran to the library, and indeed, there was a whole set of fire pokers. One of them had a curved blade on the end, while the other was straight and sharp. I gave her the sharp one and pointed to the front window. "Try it," I said, my hopes soaring. She grabbed the fire poker, bringing it back like a baseball bat. She swung with all of her might. Just like the door, it bounced off, the sound of ringing metal echoing through the room. She yelped in pain. "It's like some sort of bulletproof plexiglass or something," she yelled. "What is this place?" "Grab the poker anyway," I said. "It's time to explore the upstairs." We trudged through the eerie darkness, shadows bobbing and dancing across the hall as we made our way to the ornate staircase. Grabbing it with one hand, I slowly started to ascend. Then a scream pierced the silence. It sounded like Howie's voice. I started to run up the stairs, hearing Lillian close behind me. We turned this way and that way, looking down an endless hallway with many rooms branching off of each side. The house seemed so much larger on the inside than it looked from the outside. The carpet on the hallway showed snakes and vines. They began to writhe and undulate, the patterns moving on their own. They began to separate, snake heads peering out of the carpet as if they had come from underwater. Their slit eyes glowed in the light of the headlamps. They hissed, dozens of them slithering towards us at once. We weren't getting past them. I knew. I turned and nearly fell down the stairs in my haste to get away, stumbling and grabbing onto the handrails as my back leg smashed into the wood. It sent a fiery jet of pain up my body. Looking up, I saw Lillian still standing in place, horrified, her mouth open in a silent scream, as snake after snake coiled around her legs, going upwards. They bit into her flesh, spitting and hissing. Blood ran down her body. Soon, she was covered entirely, and fell over in the hallway, the mass of coiling snakes being dragged into the carpet by vines. As soon as her body had disappeared underneath the surface, the snakes and vines began to return to their original positions, and within seconds, I just saw a regular carpet again. She had been absorbed. "Fuck," I said, hyperventilating. I was all alone. I knew. I heard no more signs of Howie either. I thought about what to do. Desperate, scheming, I ran back towards the library. I felt in my pocket for the lighter, and grabbing a book, I began to pull pages out and run flames under the corner. They caught quickly, the old dried out paper going up in an inferno. I grabbed more books and tore out the pages, throwing them onto the flames, intent on burning this house to the ground. The fact that I was still inside it didn't register in my panicked mind. I knew that if I did nothing, I would die here. I had to destroy it. Then from behind me, I heard a voice, low and jovial, mocking. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Howie said. I turned. seeing an expression of lunatic rage marring his face. "I'm destroying this place," I said. I paused for a moment, looking at him. "How are you still alive? Lillian and Mike are dead. The house ate them, I think." He laughed. "I know," he said. "The house needs to be fed. It's been in my family for generations. We always kept it well fed in the end." My mouth dropped, uncomprehending. "You'll be its last meal for the night." He walked forward, pulling a bloody knife from his pocket. The fire poker was on the ground next to me. As he ran at me, the knife pointed straight out. I swung down, grabbing the fire poker and smashing it into the side of his head, as hard as I could. I heard a crack when it connected with his skull. He fell, the knife clattering across the room, the flames bouncing off its stained metal surface. The room behind me had begun to transform during our fight. Looking back into the shelves of the library books, I saw them changing into a mouth. The wall opened up, the plaster morphing and melting. 2 black eyes looked out at me, furious. Ancient rusted nails formed into teeth. The wall began to bow outwards towards me. The fire grew larger in front of it, catching the carpet and wood now. I knew I needed to get out, but the door wouldn't open for trespassers, and neither would the windows. Suddenly, I had an idea. Sprinting away from the demonic face in the wall, I grabbed Howie's unconscious body, dragging him by his legs to the front door. Using his hand, I gripped the knob. With a prayer, I tried to turn it, and the door flew open. Since he wasn't a trespasser, the house wouldn't keep him locked in. Looking back at his unconscious body, one last time, I swung the fire poker down on his head. I heard another crack as the side of his skull gave way, a jet of blood pouring out through the hole. I threw the weapon into the hall, running back towards the car. I tried the door, realizing it was locked. Mike had the keys on him when he had been absorbed. Watching the house turn into a blazing inferno behind me, I began to walk down the dirt road, dirty, disheveled, and frightened, but alive. You ever see an opportunity and think, that's too good to be true? Read through the fine print, find out more about it, waiting with bated breath for when it turns out you're right. Here's a piece of advice I'll give you. I'm sure you've heard it before. I did too. Yet here I am now. When something seems too good to be true, it is. I'm sitting here, 9 more hours at this desk watching security feeds. Then I get to go home and wonder why the fuck I believed that this overpaid and seemingly easy security position didn't come with the catch. Why I didn't notice all the red flags in between seeing the offer online and getting here. Why I genuinely believe I'll be lucky to have a chance to regret my decision after my shift. Let's go back to earlier today. There I was, switching between browsing through Reddit and flipping through local job offers, when a refresh of a local job listing site revealed something that caught my eye. A basic security position. Job description basically amounted to locking the doors at night, watching cameras, and calling the company if anything bad happened. And in the description, they said that they would pay $37 an hour. I was immediately skeptical of the high wage for a basic security job, especially considering the company had next to no info on it on the web. Their small website had pictures of the founders and outside of their buildings, but didn't even say what they did. However, I had the qualifications from a class I'd taken a year ago, and the possibility of walking away with $300 for a night's work seemed too enticing even though it might have been a scam. I figured it couldn't hurt to send in a resume and see what happened. I got a call from a private number not even an hour after submitting my application. The conversation was odd. The person on the other end of the phone seemed like they had no experience hiring people before, and their voice seemed somewhat stressed and worried. A couple more red flags, but I was still in the it could be legit and if it's not, I haven't lost anything kind of mindset. I'll try to recreate the phone conversation here.
Hello? Is this Christopher?
Said the voice on the other end. I replied, yes, speaking. Who is this?
This is, I work for Crossmark Inc. I'm Daniela Edwards. Head of security, head of HR. Former head of security. I'm calling because you submitted an application with us.
Daniela paused. I waited expectantly for her to continue, but when the silence dragged on a moment too long, I realized she was done speaking. What about my application?
Oh, we would like you to come in for an interview. Your credentials looked good. Yeah. Can you come into 1443 Lawson Road in 2 hours?
I was surprised. It seemed to be like either A, it was a scam, or B, they needed the position filled fast. Maybe even by tonight. If it was the latter, I was pretty sure I could talk them up to an even higher wage. So I made my decision there. I'd check out the address on Google Street View and see if there was any other info on it before I went there. And if it seemed off, I just wouldn't show up for the interview. Sure thing, thank you. Daniela hung up the phone before I even finished speaking. Fast forward 2 hours later, I was arriving at a fenced-off property in my city's industrial district, occupied by 2 buildings. They bore minimal markings and logos, but appeared to be in fair condition, and supposedly still belonged to the company I was going there to see. I pulled my 2001 Honda Civic through the gates and into the parking lot. Something felt slightly off right away, though I didn't pick up on what it was until later. The parking lot was empty, except for one other car. I stepped out and walked into the larger 1-story building facing directly onto the parking lot. The door was unlocked. The receptionist's desk sat empty, and I recalled noticing that there was dust on the blades of the fan that sat there. There was no email address in the post on the job site, and Daniela had called me from a private number. Unsure what to do, I waited in the small lobby for a few minutes and looked around at my surroundings. The entrance was a single glass door, and the front wall was made up of floor-to-ceiling windows. A metal shutter system rested on the outer wall above the glass, and a control panel on the wall inside. The receptionist's desk sat against the wall opposite of the door. On either side of the room were 8 chairs and 2 small coffee tables, complete with old magazines. To the left, a short hallway led past a single door on either side, terminating at a heavy unpainted metal exterior door, bearing dents of various sizes and shapes. For some odd reason, the exterior door made me feel uneasy. All 3 doors contained a single small window, the kind with wire mesh inside it, obscured by black paint or cloth on the inside. To the right led another hall. Oddly enough, I can't recall the length, and I usually have good attention to detail. Was it 4 doors on either side? No, 2? 16 maybe? I'm not even sure if it had a length. I didn't look at the end of the right hallway. Behind the receptionist's desk was another longer hallway, terminating in a T intersection. The first door on the left was made of brown painted metal and bore a small placard of Security Office. After waiting for a minute, a man rushed in through the front door. Sorry to have you waiting. I'm Joshua Collins, head of HR. He spoke quickly and seemed frantic and skittish. He didn't hold eye contact for more than a second at a time. As he shook my hand, I could feel his palms were sweaty and cold. Christopher Newman. I paused for a second, suddenly hit by a wave of skepticism, and decided to test if he could keep his story straight. I spoke to a woman named Daniela Edwards on the phone. I thought she said she was the head of HR. Joshua ignored me and continued. Mr. Newman, my company needs a new security guard fast. The last 2 quit this morning, and we can't afford to go a night without someone watching the property. We've tried to get you here as fast as possible because you'll need to be ready for work by sunset. We're in a rush, so we'll skip the usual process. If you're able to start right now, then you can consider yourself hired. The salary is $37 an hour, non-negotiable. Sign this NDA and you can start right now. I didn't like how pushy he was being, but it had showed that I was right. They were looking for a fast, probably temporary hire, and I wasn't about to turn down that kind of money. I flipped through the NDA. It was pretty long, so I skipped most of it, but I know how these contracts are. Don't disclose company secrets, yada yada. I signed it and followed Joshua to the security office. The orientation was short and simple. Here's your keychain. This one opens the security office door. This one opens most of the other offices. This one controls the shutter on the front windows. Here's your mag light. You can use this as a baton in a pinch, but you're better to lock yourself in the security office and call us if you see anything suspicious. All you have to do is sit in the office and watch the camera feeds. You don't need to patrol since you don't have a partner to watch the feeds when you're gone. We don't provide a uniform, so you can just put your badge on your shirt. The front door is the only one that's unlocked right now. Ignore the exterior doors and the offices in the long hallway. Lock the front gate. And that's it. What's this binder for? I asked, pointing at a white binder on the desk, bearing the company logo. Oh, read that on your shift. Joshua looked uncomfortable at the mention of the binder and avoided my gaze as he stammered out his reply. He didn't wait to see if I had any further questions before he hurriedly left, getting into the only car in the parking lot, apart from mine, and speeding off. I assumed my security guard role right away. I went outside and locked the gates, closed the metal shutter over the front glass, and locked the front door. Then I sealed myself in the security office and opened the binder up. That binder is what prompted me to write this down. When I opened it, I expected a long, boring write-up of company policy involving various situations that may happen after hours. Specific rules for dealing with burglars and vandals. You know, that sort of thing. Instead, there was only one page. What was on that page made me realize that this job was in fact too good to be true, and is why I'm genuinely terrified right now. Welcome to Crossmark Inc. There are 10 company rules security personnel must follow in order to ensure their safety and well-being. The long hallway is off limits. If you cross the threshold from the lobby, turn around immediately and walk back. Do not run. Do not look at the long hallway for prolonged periods. If any security camera shows it, shut it down immediately. Do not open the door at the end of the short hallway. Building 2 is off limits and is to be observed only via camera feeds. If you must go inside, use only the front door. The coffee machine will automatically turn on at 2:17 a.m. Ensure a cup is placed beneath it prior to this time. When the liquid is dispensed into the cup, place it outside the door of the security office. Lock the door and do not open it again until 2:37 a.m. Do not leave the security office between 4:01 and 4:02 a.m. If you hear a female voice coming from an indeterminate point within the building, unlock the door on the left of the short hallway. Do not enter the room unless the voice invites you to do so. Do not look at her face. If you hear a male voice upon unlocking the door, return to the security office immediately. If you feel you're in immediate danger, call this number using the phone in the security office. Do not contact emergency services before sunrise. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt to leave Crossmark Inc. before sunrise. I have 9 hours left in this shift. I'd rather walk out of here broke than stick around for the rest of the night, but the instructions made it clear that I'll have to stick it out until morning. Wish me luck. Update. It's 2:15 a.m. It's been fairly uneventful so far, and I hope I don't jinx it by saying that. I've just stayed in the office and split my time between watching security camera feeds and watching YouTube to calm my nerves. It's demon coffee time in 2 minutes. The cup is already in place, and I'm hoping everything goes well. Update 2. 3:30 a.m. Demon coffee disappeared after being left outside the door. I heard something knocking and scratching at the door during the time I was told to keep it closed, though I wasn't able to see it on the cameras. The only one watching the office door started showing the long hallway, and I had to turn it off. There's a persistent shadow in the corner of the room that seems darker than a normal shadow. It doesn't go away, even when I shine my flashlight right at it. The instructions didn't say anything about a shadow, so I'm just going to not touch it, and occasionally check to see if it changes in size or moves or anything. Still haven't heard the woman's voice. I could have sworn I glimpsed a humanoid figure on the Building 2 cameras a few times, though I can't find it when I suspect my feeds more closely. I no longer have even the slightest doubt that this place is haunted as shit. Update 3. 4:29 a.m. I was feeling pretty shaken, so I didn't write this up immediately, but here's basically what happened. I'll put it in more detail in my next post. At 3:45, I heard the woman's voice. I was going to ignore it until 4:02, but it got louder and louder until it hurt, and I gave in. She invited me in, but I heard the male voice as soon as I sat down, and I ran back to the office. As for what happened at 4:01, I'll write that up later. I'm still really shaken by it. I'll just say I was glad for the reinforced metal door on the office, and that I really regret taking this job. I guess I'll pick up where I left off. At 3:45 a.m., the female voice began to whisper in a language I didn't recognize. Might have been completely gibberish for all I know. Starting from a point to my left and seemingly changing direction as it spoke. I was planning to stay in the office and wait until 4:02 to unlock the door, but what started as a whisper got louder and louder until it began to actually hurt. The voice was all I could perceive. It came at me from every angle and seemed to scream directly into my mind. I realized that it had only been 2 minutes since she started speaking, and I'd go mad if I had to wait another 14. I ran out of the office, past the dust-covered receptionist desk, and into the short hallway where I fumbled with my keys to unlock the door. The screaming stopped as soon as I opened it. The interior of the room is hazy in my memory, but I clearly recall a desk with a chair on either side, illuminated in the middle of a room so dark I couldn't see anything else. A woman sat on the far side of the desk and motioned for me to come in and sit down across from her. Walking through the darkness was odd. My footsteps didn't make any noise, and my senses somehow seemed muffled. I had only just sat down when a male voice let out a distressed cry, and I sprinted back to the office without looking back. I made it back at 4 o'clock. I couldn't have spent more than 20 seconds inside the room. I said in my last post that what happened between 4:01 and 4:02 really shook me up. I promised I'd write it down here. Maybe getting it out loud would help me stop remembering that thing. When the clock struck 4:01, I heard a blood-curdling inhuman scream from the lobby. On the camera feed, I don't know what it was that I saw. Something inhuman. I know that. I can't recall its shape. Dark. A little bigger than a person. Seeing it then, and recalling it now, instills a horrible fear in me. So intense that I don't think I'll ever sleep again after seeing it. That thing, it sprinted out of the long hallway into the lobby. It ran to the exterior door at the end of the short hallway, beat at it for a few seconds with limbs that I could neither see nor hear, but was nonetheless sure it could kill me in an instant. It gave up on the door, and instead began sprinting back and forth in the hall outside the security office. All I could do was watch it run left and right on the cameras, listening to that horrible scream and the oddly arrhythmic thumping of its formless feet on the cheap linoleum tiles. As I watched it sprint, it suddenly looked at the camera. It had no eyes. I didn't see the rest of its face. All I know is that it stopped then, and I was affixed by its eyeless gaze, until even its scream seemed to fade into the background. I felt it staring at me, burning with a foreign, alien emotion mixed with curiosity. Curiosity that suddenly became hatred. As I looked at it, I knew this thing hated me more intensely than I had ever known anything could hate. It wanted to kill me. It would run forever through fire and hell in pursuit of me, would never stop until I died by its hands. I would never be free of its unending hatred. It would hunt me down until the day I died. It tore its face from the camera and lunged at the office door, and I had suddenly become aware that it had never stopped screaming. As it began to beat upon the scratched painted metal, I don't know how many arms it had. It could have been anywhere from 2 to 9. It seemed to change every time it hit the door. Its screams, as alien and inhuman as they were, seemed to grow frustrated. It desperately needed to get in, needed to rip me apart, and this fucking door was keeping it from the only thing it truly wanted. This piece of metal, this creation of the abomination that is man, was stopping it from attaining the only thing it cared about. The monster's screams rose to a demonic crescendo as the door rattled more and more. I was sure it was about to give out under the stress. Just as I was beginning to accept that I was going to die here, the cacophony of screaming and clanging cut off abruptly. I checked the time. 4:02. I checked the cameras, deciding to test my luck with the one I'd turned off earlier, since it was showing the long hallway, no sign of the monster, and the door was, oddly, undamaged. As soon as I was sure the screaming monster was gone, I opened the binder and used the office phone to call the emergency number. It rang for a long time before someone picked it up.
Daniela Edwards. Let me guess. It's the screamer?
You? How did you know?
Comes out at the same time every night. Stays for exactly 1 minute. Please only call for stuff that's not in the binder.
I felt that thing staring into me. What happened to the last guy to look it in the eye? Am I safe? She hung up without another word. I glanced uneasily at the shadow in the corner, its ominous presence somehow diminished by the fact that it hadn't moved. I resigned that my next bathroom break would be at the nearest place that sold coffee, and the next time I would leave the room would be at the end of my shift. The rest of the night was stressful. The dark figure in Building 2 kept appearing on the feeds in the corner of my vision, only to vanish as soon as I tried to look closer. Several times, I noticed cameras showing parts of Building 2 that weren't there before. An office door down the hall from me opened and closed at its own regular intervals, making me jump every time. At 5:55, every odd-numbered camera showed the long hallway, and I had to frantically turn them off. I could have sworn a few of them had showed a vague, eyeless face in the distance. I noticed that the clock on my phone was about 16 minutes behind the one on the wall. I decided I'd wait until the slower of the two showed it was time to go. I didn't want to risk leaving early and getting caught by whatever was responsible for the rule to stay here until dawn. I'll just write a simple log of what happened in the final hours of my shift, because it's easier to follow. 6:30. Camera 4 showed a man with my build and hair color in the lobby, and he had my face. But something seemed off about it. I blinked, and he vanished. 6:57. Camera 6, which looks down the short hallway, showed the heavy metal door rattling for about 20 seconds. 7:13. The chair at the receptionist's desk fell over. 7:15. The receptionist's chair was standing up. The layer of dust on it was untouched. 7:32. Camera 16 showed a hallway in Building 2 that, based on my perception of its layout, would have been outside the building's footprint. 7:50. I noticed symbols, or perhaps characters in a foreign language, that appeared to be drawn in dust on the receptionist's computer screen, an ancient CRT monitor with a beige plastic exterior. 8 o'clock. Symbols are gone. The shadow in the corner of the room has disappeared. Sunlight finally begins to slip around the edges of my shutters. My shift ended at 9. You can be damn sure that I wanted to book it out of there as soon as I could. On my way from the office to the door, something in the long hallway caught my attention from the corner of my eye. As hard as I tried not to look at it, it forced me to turn my head. In the hallway, a long distance away, maybe 100 yards, maybe a few steps. Distance doesn't really work right there. Was a face. It had no eyes, just depressions in its skin, if it even had skin, where eyes should have been, and it grinned at me with human teeth. It took a huge amount of willpower, but I managed to pull my gaze away from it, open the shutter and front door, unlock the gate, and drive away so fast that if there were cops in the area, I'd have had my license taken away then and there. I threw my keys onto the ground in front of the door. I felt the thing's gaze burning into the back of my head as I sped away. It became less intense with distance, but I still feel it watching me now, at home, across the city. Faint, but not gone. I haven't slept. I haven't eaten. I tried to contact the company, but I can't find a damn thing about them online. Their website is gone. Google returns no results. And on Google Maps, there's no company listed at their address. There's no history of them on the job listing site. I even had foresight to write down the emergency number in the binder, but calling it gives me an automated message telling me the number is no longer in service. A check arrived in the mail earlier today. No return address, and the name on the check, Joshua Collins, wasn't enough to go off of. It came with the note. Here's the night's pay. I have a feeling you won't be back for another shift. Any residual effects you experience should disappear over the coming days. Thank you for working at Crossmark Inc., a subsidiary of Extra Normal Containment Solutions. Joshua Collins, project lead. I don't know what the fuck I got myself into. I hope I don't get tied up in any of this. Extra Normal Containment Solutions sure sounds a whole lot like a real-life equivalent to the SCP Foundation. And if they're anything alike, I'd prefer to stay the fuck away. I know for a fact that I won't ignore red flags in the hiring process like that ever again. I'll never sign up for a suspicious job offer as long as I live. It's fully cemented in my mind now. When something seems too good to be true, it is. I'm staying in a small town on business. I don't want to give out too much detail about myself, but I'm a salesman and am working on a deal with the local farmers for my company. I've been here for less than a week, and have been making some decent progress, but it's been a little complicated and had a few snags here and there. I'm renting a little townhouse and paying weekly since there are no hotels nearby. The place is on the edge of town, though there is a little gas station and general store across the road. I would rather minimalize the details I give because I don't want this being traced back to me. I would rather be anonymous, assuming I can get out of here. I never thought I would say this, but the deal seems irrelevant now. I have always been a materialist and never believed in anything paranormal before, but I am questioning a lot after last night. I saw something come into town, a person I think. They walked like a person, but I don't think I can call them a human being after what I saw them do and what they looked like, not to mention the company they keep. I'm not even sure if this whole thing is not just some kind of waking nightmare. I have a job to do, and I would like to keep it, but something is extremely wrong. I know people are missing, and I think I might know why. If I'm being honest with myself, there probably should be no doubt, other than the fact that it contradicts my views on reality. I was taking out the garbage last night, and was enjoying the quietude of the silence, in contrast to the loud and active city I'm used to. I was indulging in a cigarette as I looked down the road that leads out of town. At night, it's all but pitch dark the further out you look. Only the meager lights of the town, my house, and the gas station providing light on the barren road. No endless street lamps, just wilderness on one side and flat land on the other. It's generally pretty peaceful, and I like the sound of the cicadas. I was puffing on my cigarette when I noticed something odd. I could not figure it out for a while, but eventually, about halfway through, I realized that things were even more quiet than normal. No wind, no cicadas, nothing. It was off-putting. I found myself sort of looking around. It was a surreal feeling, almost ominous. The only thing that was not silent was the faint hum of the lights across the street, the low buzz having a monopoly on sound at the moment. I tried to soak in the situation, standing there alone in the night, looking down the endless road that led into a dark horizon. That was when I saw a figure making their way down the road in the distance. It was hard to see much in the way of details in the night, and with the distance between us, but I found myself transfixed for a moment. I thought to myself, who could be walking down the road this late at night with no towns for miles? The first answer that came to mind was some kind of vagrant. Something did not seem right about this theory, but at least it halfway fit. Something still felt off about what I was seeing though. I have always been skeptical, and I have never given credence to superstition and the paranormal. Yet despite this, my intuition was whispering to me that I was wrong. Something did not add up about the stranger I saw down the road. That's when I noticed, in the few moments I had spent thinking, the figure had crossed a considerable amount of distance before I had realized it. The pace they were moving at was leisurely and slow, but I noticed that every step they took seemed to cross more distance than it rightfully should have. I watched as if transfixed, as the figure, which had been so recently pretty far off, rapidly shaved the distance between it and me. I could make out more of them now. They had a long dark coat. They were also dragging something behind them, a large massive sack. It looked like it was made of leather. The sound of it was grating. It cut through the silence, and even through the faint buzzing of the lights across the street. It was a sound that filled my stomach with ice. It never ceased. It just kept going on and on as the figure got closer to the driveway of the townhouse. I looked at them, and I could make out long white hair and an equally pale face. The face itself was long, with a big long chin and a nose as well. The features were exaggerated to an absurd degree, almost like a caricature. I thought I saw a smile, dark lips parting to reveal long horse teeth. The hand not dragging the large sack rose up as if to wave. The hand was as pale as the rest of them, but I could see that his nails were exceptionally long, not unlike talons. What stood out most were the eyes, which were bright red and glittered with malice. I knew then. I was not looking at any normal person. I wasn't sure if I was looking at a person at all. I put out the cigarette, stomped it out, and went inside the house as quick as I possibly could. When I did so, I couldn't help but feel that stranger was right upon my heels. I latched the door, which even came with a thick piece of wood to bar upon the interior. I remember hearing my heartbeat and breathing hard, closing the blinds. I had not yet turned on the lights and dared not to, so the house was exceptionally dark. My breathing was starting to calm down when I heard a knock at my door. Tap, tap, tap. I was unsure if I had even heard the faint sound, but I quickly felt ice flood my veins again. The sound of talons against the door. It came again a bit harder after that. Bang, bang, bang. I was at a loss what to do. Call the sheriff? I saw the doorknob begin to shake, as whoever was there was trying to get in. The pounding became more insistent, more aggressive. Bang, bang, bang. It occurred to me, if they really wanted to, the stranger could feasibly break a window and waltz right in. Were they trying to scare me? Did they not realize how easy it would be? The thought of this person busting my window with their sack, coming in to meet me, finally spurred me into action. I went to my room to the sound of endless knocking, and went to the landline since my phone has abysmal signal here. I dialed the sheriff's number frantically, hoping someone would pick up. Every moment I waited, I expected to hear shattering glass. Finally, the sheriff picked up. There is someone outside my house, knocking on my door, and they haven't stopped. I think they are some kind of transient. He was a bit skeptical, but he could hear the noise on his end as well. So he said he would be right there and told me to sit tight. Bang, bang, bang. What the hell is wrong with you? Get out of here. I screamed with everything I had at the door. The frequency of the knocking only increased exponentially, as if to answer my challenge. I began to yell. This went on for I don't know how long. It felt like minutes. It felt like an eternity. That was when the knocking suddenly stopped. I remember feeling lightheaded and having a nosebleed. I saw the lights through my blinds and heard the sound of a car pulling up. Oh, thank God, I thought. I ran upstairs to get a look at what the hell was going on and what was going to happen. I was only partially relieved. Something told me that the ordeal was far from over. The window of my bedroom saw me looking down at the road. There was the sheriff, outside his car, with his shotgun out yelling towards my door. But I couldn't see the threshold. I saw something dark lash out like a viper, and the sheriff dropped his gun as it was struck. I still remember the look on his face. I don't think I'll ever forget it. I had only spoken to him a few times, but he had seemed the no-nonsense hard-bitten type. The type of guy that was raised in the country, then served in the military, and carried that discipline and attitude with him the rest of his life. A man of stern practicality. The type of man that looked like he didn't scare easily. He was as white as a ghost, and his mouth was gaping open, slack-jawed, blue eyes bugging out as he backed up towards his car slowly, arms raised up in front of him as if in an apology. I also noticed there was a wet stain on his crotch. Oh shit, I remember whispering. If the fearless sheriff left now, that would leave me alone with whoever was outside again. I ran a hand through my hair again and again, as I saw my only salvation get into his car and peel out. Shit, I cried out, not wanting to believe what I had just seen, not wanting to believe this surreal nightmare that had become my life. I had been abandoned. I pinched myself hard, and it hurt. This was not a dream. I waited for a few moments, wondering what was going to happen next. Bang, bang, bang. The banging continued again downstairs. What had remained of the sun had long since gone now. Night had fallen in earnest, and now I was alone with a stranger that had sent an officer in the law who had served in the military, running in sheer terror. It began to dawn on me that I could scarcely deny whatever was outside my door was not a normal person, not something that my rationality had an answer to. Bang, bang, bang. I stayed upstairs, afraid to go down. The knocks were so loud I could practically feel the house shake. I imagined that this is what it must have been like to be under siege. What else was there to do? My only hope had turned tail, and it was just me and the thing that was either trying to get in my house or toying with me to instill fear. I could not help but feel a vague sense of sadistic enjoyment coming from those knocks. It felt like a game, but one I did not think I was going to end up winning. Time seemed to lose meaning. This might have gone on for several minutes or several hours. I think it was the latter, because I definitely lost time. Eventually, the rapping stopped, and I waited in dread, wondering if it was just a false sense of security, or if they had become bored with the game and were ready to actually do something. I dared to look outside the second-story window again. They were getting off my porch, dragging that big leather sack with them. My porch light was on, and I could only see the back of them and their shock-white long fine hair. I saw a lump form on the bag, then another, and I realized with even greater horror, something was inside of it. There was a rope fastened around the lip of the bag, and the stranger undid it, and something small and pink came out. It was like a hairless chimpanzee, but with a baby-shaped head, and long fingers with even longer talons. I remember the stranger caressing it, lovingly stroking behind its pointed ears. He then closed the bag and began dragging it as he turned towards town. I saw them give a little finger wave to me as they moseyed off. A few seconds later, I heard something on my roof. Scratching, tapping, scratching, tapping. I was reaching my limit. I then saw the creature's face peek upside down from my window, its pink palms against the glass as it gave a fangled smile. Saucer red eyes with brows raised in delight and hunger. As it began pounding on the glass while shrieking with inhuman emotion, I ran out of the room, and a few moments later, the sound I had been dreading for an eternity happened. I heard the sound of breaking glass. I sprinted through the darkened house. I ran down the steps and tripped. I saw it bounding down the hallway, scampering towards the stairs. I pulled myself up and ran to the kitchen to find a knife. I heard it crawling on the wall. I felt its closeness as I pulled out the butcher knife from the wooden holder on the counter. I have never been much of a fighter, but I was so pumped full of adrenaline at this point. I was just in fight or flight. I cut wildly at the thing, which ducked and dodged and hopped around. I think I scored a hit, 'cause I heard it squeal in pain and rage. It was so damn fast though. It was hopping all over the surfaces of the kitchen, crawling on the walls, moving around furniture and using it for cover. It was when it was pulling that little game that it got me from behind. It was so damn strong, probably to do with its long arms, and it tripped me easily and got on my arm. I dropped the knife and slid it to my other hand and rolled over as I shot my arm out. I stuck it right in the chest, and it went through like butter, sinking all the way through. It stumbled backward, gasping at the knife. A look on its face that was all too human. It looked surprised. It was trying to pull it out when it fell backward and began to spasm on the floor, frothing at the mouth. I got up quickly and caught my breath, looking at it twitch wildly. I stumbled to get another knife and get ready, but when I turned around, it looked different. It was beginning to melt, the pinkish skin starting to peel and dry, as the bones and muscle turned red and became fluid that started to seep all over the kitchen floor. It was not exceptionally fast. It actually took minutes, but after a while, all that was left was red gunk and dried crusty flakes. It looked like bloody vomit. I killed it. What remains of that creature is probably still there, a smear on the kitchen floor. I didn't go to bed last night, so time feels weird. I called the sheriff earlier this morning, but there was no answer. I haven't really slept, but I don't think sleep deprivation has hit me yet. I feel too on edge. I'm too high-strung, too paranoid to go to sleep. Not before I put distance between me and this place. My car's gas line was cut and the tires slashed. I can't use it to leave. I've been to town today, but most of the few shops are closed. Nobody knows where the mechanic is either. I went to the sheriff's office and he was not in either, and his car was gone. I've considered going to the mayor, but I can't get a hold of him, and he lives about 15 miles outside of town. I dare not try to tell anyone what happened last night. Would they even believe me as a city guy? Would they believe their town was invaded last night by some stranger who can conjure homicidal monkeys out of a bag? I have another nosebleed right now. I need to wrap this up. I'm typing this at the town library, and I'm not sure if I will be able to get another one of these out. My current plan is to try and pay one of the locals to drive me to the next town over, before whatever has come to this place gets worse. One last thing. When I left the townhouse, there was something carved into my door. It reads like, IRO. Does that mean anything to anyone? As I drove home from work in the middle of the night, a crying woman covered in blood came running out of the forest. I saw her only milliseconds before she left a thick grove of trees on my right. Her eyes were wild and uncomprehending, her mouth open in a perpetual shriek, her clothes torn into rags, but otherwise, she was beautiful and young. I saw only the merest glimpse of a slender white leg before I instinctively turned the steering wheel all the way to the left, trying not to hit her. At the speed I was going, and with the constant rain falling down from the sky, I quickly lost control of the car. I missed her by mere inches as I swerved into the oncoming lane where, thankfully, no cars were coming. In slow motion, I saw the road pass by and then start to rise up to meet me as the car began to flip. I felt like I was in the air for minutes, but in reality, it was likely only a fraction of a second. Then the car landed, the black pavement rushing up to meet me, and my vision turned to blackness. I woke up suddenly in a white room, the walls seemingly to be made of high-intensity LED lights. They were so bright and white that it almost hurt to look at them. I squinted my eyes slightly, and they slowly began to adjust the overwhelming white light surrounding me. I stood up and looked around. Rising off the bed made some of the same kind of light. Where am I? I asked. No one answered. I began to walk around, and a building began to materialize around me suddenly. The white light all draining out of the bottom of the room, like water running down a drain. I was in a castle. In the entryway, looking out massive black gated doors. I looked behind me and saw the bed was just a bench, with flat pillows inscribed with roses and cherubs. The castle seemed to stretch on forever in a straight line. Hallways with endless mahogany doors disappearing into a point in the horizon. No one moved in the rooms or the hallway. Outside, birds chirping pleasantly, and a tropical, sweet-smelling breeze blew past me. I turned my attention back to the front gate, deciding to go outside. As soon as I stepped outside the shade of the castle, a blazing sun warmed me. I instinctively put my arm above my eyes to dim the summer light. As my pupils constricted and I was able to see better, I realized that the light overhead was not coming from a sun, but many eyes looking down at me from the sky. They all sent out some light of their own, brighter than a full moon but far dimmer than the actual sun. I could look up at them and see them moving around, their pupils dilating and constricting as each eye focused on something new. They stayed in constant motion, and there were thousands of them, covering the sky with white sclera, gray, purple, and green irises, and constantly flicking pupils as far as my eye could see. "Those are the eyes of God," a voice behind me said. I turned and saw a beautiful woman there, holding out her hands towards me. She had green eyes that shone like emerald and a sweet melodic voice that instantly calmed me. "You are in heaven. You did it. You beautiful child." She came over and put a hand on my cheek. It burned with her touch, sending waves of happiness through my body. As I looked closer at her, I realized she had on platinum armor and a scabbard, with an obsidian sword handle sticking out of the top. Tiny diamonds and emeralds decorated both the scabbard and the handle. "This isn't like I imagined heaven to be," I said, looking at the trees all around us. They were covered in silver and gold, rising up hundreds of feet into the sky. They stood like skyscrapers, swaying slightly to and fro, as the tropical breeze blew the smell of fruits and ocean through the air. At the top, I saw what looked like people moving around, flying even, but they were so high up, I could barely make them out even when I squinted. "Well, the truth is," she said, her smile widening from ear to ear, showing dozens of sharpened, blood-soaked teeth, her voice deepening and turning into a hissing gurgle. "God killed himself to make this world and your world and everything in between." She brought up her other hand, and now the waves of pleasure I had felt were replaced with burning pain, as she scratched me with huge talons that suddenly exploded out of her fingers. Her skin began to blacken, but the eyes stayed green, expanding into circles of luminous viridescent light between folds of black rotted skin. Massive black wings unfurled behind her, squirming with millions of maggots that constantly fell to the ground, writhing as they tried to return home. The smell of the wings made me gag, reminding me of a combination of burning rubber and rotting roadkill. I screamed, clutching my cheek and feeling blood running down in rivets. I turned, running away from this monster as fast as I could. The eyes above me seemed to move faster, as if they had been agitated. At that moment, 4 people rushed in from the forest waving swords and crossbows. They barely seemed to notice me, focusing entirely on the female shapeshifter behind me. She hissed at them like a snake, sending her long forked tongue flicking out of her mouth and pulling her glowing sword from its scabbard. With a battle cry that made my ears ring, she rushed forward, slicing off the head of the man in front. I saw it fly across the air in slow motion, the man's body falling to its knees. He still had a look of surprise in his eyes when his head landed a few feet to the left of his body on the tropical white sands of the ground. The others wasted no time, using the female's distraction with the front sword-wielding man to attack her ferociously. One shot her directly in the neck with the crossbow, the bolt piercing through, and reminding me of the bolts on the neck of Frankenstein's monster. She screamed with rage and pain as another rushed her from the left, swinging a massive broadsword at her jaw. Time seemed to slow down as the sword connected, cutting through the skin of the monster easily. As it penetrated deeper, sickly green light began to shoot out of the wound, and by the time he had fully decapitated her, the light was so blinding I could no longer look at it. "We have to go," a woman screamed, pointing up to the tops of the massive trees. Looking up, I saw dozens of flying specks, looking like an agitated hornet's nest, as they regrouped and began to approach. As I squinted my eyes, I realized they were more of the black-skinned monstrosities, coming to the aid of the one this group of humans had just killed. I doubted whether they would be able to help her, as one glance at her body showed me her head only hung on by the spine and the associated ligaments and flesh in the back of the neck. She didn't move anymore, and the sickening green light had all evaporated. The maggots still swarmed, however, and ferociously began to move from the wings to the rest of the body. The woman grabbed my arm, forcing me to run into the forest with her. The rest of the group was ahead of us. I heard the shrill battle cry of the flying monsters landing behind us. But the woods were growing thicker, and the constant sharp turns of the leading members of our group would make it harder to find us. After a couple of minutes of running, the shrieking and screaming falling further and further behind us, the man in front stopped suddenly. He opened up a camouflage tunnel, pushing aside some of the silver leaves that covered the top of it. The rest of the group jumped down. The fall was only a few feet, and I realized there were torches burning in a cramped tunnel. I walked forward, hearing the man close the door and land just behind me, pushing me forward. We quickly came to a round room, with a massive log table down the middle of it. Dozens of swords, crossbows, daggers, and tridents covered it, all seeming to glow with their own soft silver light. At the nearest end, the table was cleared and chairs were set up around a steaming pot. A chubby man ladled out bowls of delicious-smelling stew, smelling of mint, rosemary, potatoes, and beef. He motioned for us to come sit down and eat. I hadn't realized it until then, but I was absolutely ravenous. They introduced themselves, and we sat down to eat. They poured delicious-smelling wine from crystal pitchers, and I ate the beef stew and drank the red wine, as they told me everything. "This is heaven," the chubby man said, sitting down on the bench across from me and pouring himself a glass of the wine. "Or at least, it used to be. It isn't the heaven like most people think of it anymore. Remember, I don't know all of this absolutely, but I've heard most of it from angels and others who have been here a long time, so at least most of it is true." "You mean that shape-shifting monster?" I began. He nodded. "Those are angels. They have become rabid and evil over the last few billion years, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Nearly 14 billion years ago, God killed himself to create the universe. He cut himself open and let out eternal amounts of mass, energy, and consciousness pour out of his body, an action which became known to us as the Big Bang. All of this matter had nowhere to go within God's body, so it created our universe instead. Now, God dying isn't like you or me dying, you understand? God dies very, very slowly. It's like he's been bleeding out the entire time. But now, he truly is close to death. In our universe's time, maybe another 1,000 years at most, and he'll be gone. Once he goes, the entire universe as we know it will go too. It'll instantly turn to blackness once the light of his consciousness no longer lights the stars and worlds of our universe. These angels here, they got an idea that if they feed the human souls in heaven to God's mouth, he would live slightly longer. And it seems to be working. Every time they feed him a few thousand souls, he seems to heal slightly, but he is still dying. At most, they might delay the end by a few centuries, but even that seems doubtful. The man shook his face, his jowls shaking slightly. "You can't really die in heaven. As if you get your head cut off, it'll grow back after a couple of hours. But if they feed you to God's mouth, then you do, in essence, die. Your consciousness is digested by God, and it is fed throughout his body, dissipating into eternity within him." "Where's God's mouth?" I asked. All the people in the room looked at each other, a sour expression on their faces. "It's at the end of heaven," the chubby man said, his eyes downcast. "It is a horrible thing to behold. Trillions of gnashing teeth, endless insects infesting it and screaming in unison. Since its body began to fall apart, the insects of heaven have really begun to consume his flesh. I think it is driving God insane. A lot of terrible things in our world might be arising from his insanity and dying. The world wars, the death camps, the mass killings by communists. But that's just speculation. I don't know that for sure." At that moment, I heard a loud crash outside. Shouts and running from above us made everyone deathly silent. Then the hidden trap door leading down here was flung open, and angels began pouring down the opening, carrying glowing swords and crossbows. They instantly attacked, dozens more coming from behind them. They slashed at the chef. He absurdly raised his wine glass in front of him, as if that would stop the sword flying down towards his skull. But it instead cleaved his face in two, and he fell backwards. Within seconds, everyone except me was moaning, dead or dying. I instinctively picked up my wooden bowl, spilling stew all over myself and the floor. The angels began to pull the hacked up bodies of the others they had murdered out, then approached me, their dead black eyes staring daggers at me as I backed against the dirt wall of the hidden shelter. Just as they had all surrounded me, and one was raising his sword to cut me open, I began hearing sounds that didn't fit. Clear. Again. He's waking up. As the sword came down towards my face, I suddenly opened my eyes. My other eyes, feeling the cold, damp pavement beneath my body. I looked around and saw myself surrounded by paramedics. A Lifestar helicopter loudly descending 100 feet further down the road. I saw the naked woman who had run out in front of my car in the back of an ambulance. I looked down and saw the wooden bowl in my hand still, cleaved in two by a sword. Remnants of herbs and sauce still clinging to the inside of it. Then I closed my eyes and fell back asleep. The doctors at the hospital told me I had been clinically dead for 5 minutes. Apparently the woman I had almost hit was the latest victim of a serial killer. She had escaped from him and ran blindly into the road out of mortal terror. I didn't blame her in the least, and was simply glad I didn't hit her. I still have the wooden bowl I brought back with me, and the slices on my cheek from that thing I encountered. Once I get out of here, I want to send the remnants of the bowl to a scientific institute to see what it is truly made out of. I have a feeling it's not a kind of wood anyone on Earth has ever seen before. The vision of heaven I had received was the most disturbing thing of the entire experience. It truly changed my life, and not for the better. I wasn't afraid of dying before, but I certainly am now. I used to break into houses. I'm not particularly proud of it, but it was a different time in my life. A more desperate time. I won't make excuses for it. All I can say is I needed a quick way to make money, and typical employment options were not exactly open to me. My last job, however, something happened that I can never explain, and also never forget. Something I have never really told anyone, but I think it will drive me insane if I don't. Maybe I'm headed there anyway. I had a buddy named Sam who helped me, or rather I helped him, since he was more experienced at the whole career criminal thing. I did this for about 2 years, going into houses, taking whatever we thought was worth it. We only ever did it when we were absolutely sure nobody was home. Sometimes we would stake out the place for weeks or even a few months. We tried not to get anything too physically heavy. Pretty much anything valuable was fair game. Sometimes we would keep things for ourselves though. We once found a few 8-balls and made pretty good windfall out of that at this one place. Sometimes we just found pot or booze, but usually we just partook of that ourselves, usually in celebration of a successful job. A lot of times, we would get little knickknacks we thought were cool, keychains, clothing, shit like that. Sam had found us a nice little mark for a little bacon and eggs, our code word for our little thing. It was out of the way, so minimum chances of witnesses, and apparently the owner was trying to sell it and was no longer living there, but had yet to move all their stuff out. This was an unusually easy job. That should have been a hint. It sounded like a cakewalk. We just had to time it right to be careful. We decided we would want to start after dark the following Friday. We had to arrange to borrow the van we used, which incidentally cut TC, the guy who owned the one we used, in on some of the action. TC was a madman, but we needed him. And for this kind of work, you needed a specific kind of vehicle. It was a piece of junk, but it had a lot of space and was easy to change. We repainted it and switched the tags on it at least a dozen times, after and before every job we used it for. The ride there was long. It was a bit out of the way, and Sam only knew of it because he knew a guy that knew the owner that let it slip what the situation was. It had only taken a bit of online research to find the address based on the fact it was for sale. It was unusually empty on the highway for a Friday night, but we rarely went this far out into the boonies. Dusk was falling, so why is this guy even selling the place? I asked Sam. I think Mikey told me about it, but I was more interested in the other details, not so much if anything is wrong with the house. This bothered me a little. Yeah, well, what if the place has a gas leak or mold or some shit? I asked. I looked at him as he leaned back. Then I guess this might be our last job together. Nice knowing you, buddy. I remember him saying that while smirking. He must have sensed I was a little nervous. Relax. If it was anything serious, they wouldn't be putting it on the market so fast, he said. Something was needling me about the whole situation, but just barely. A little prick in the back of my mind that I could not quite figure out. The sky got darker, and there were fewer and fewer cars on the road. There were no headlights either. Only open fields and dark thickets on either side of us. We got into town a bit after 10 p.m., and it was drizzling a little. We waited a bit longer at a gas station parking lot before going to the place. It was an old house. Not like ludicrously so, but you could tell it had probably been built before cars were a thing. The house was out of the way, a few blocks from any neighbors, so we had that as an advantage. It was 3 stories including the attic. But Sam also told me there was a basement. It was fogging up from the rain, which was actually great, as it would give us further cover. Everything seemed perfect, and yet something about the house seemed off to me. I remember a slight sense of foreboding, as the large wooden structure seemed to loom over us. Yeah, that's the word for how it looked. It was looming. I remember thinking how tall it looked, and yet narrow. It had a very angular design triangular roof, and was made mostly of wood, it looked like. I asked Sam about the potential for cameras or alarms, and he shrugged. We had a police scanner, in addition to radios to keep in touch. We just gotta boogie on out if there's an alarm, and we got a mask and gloves for the cameras. Come on, let's do this, he said as we moved towards the back of the house going around the side. We had an idea of what the place was like, and that there was a cellar in the back which led into the sub-basement. We had bolt cutters and made short work of the chain and padlock. A faint spark flying from the strain of the cut as we opened the cellar doors carefully and looked down at the wooden steps that led into the dank, dark basement. I remember the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I remember now knowing for sure that something was bothering me about this place. I was not a superstitious type. I never believed in ghosts or demons or anything like that. But there was just something about how this whole thing was going down. An instinctive dread that had been steadily building. It was more than typical nerves and adrenaline that came with doing a job. This was different, like a tiny bell ringing somewhere in the city of my mind, letting the villagers know to go inside. Uh-oh, boogeyman living down there? Sam teased, probably sensing the apprehension. I'll go first then, he said, as he crept down the stairs and put on his flashlight. It was a bright one too, and as I followed and turned on mine, I was a bit put off by how little of the cellar they were illuminating. The darkness was sticking, and stubbornly refused to be washed away by the light easily, too thick to be completely dispelled. It was not the kind of thing you can confirm as really being a problem, but it was enough to be annoying at best and unsettling at worst. There might be some old wine down here. That shit might sell, I said. But it's not like me and Sam knew people in the vineyard business. We separated a bit, and I didn't like that, but I was refusing to give in to my anxiety. We were professionals at this point. I heard the sound of bolt cutters again. Then I remember Sam making a weird noise from the other room before yelling out, "What in the flying ever living? Hey, yo, come see this." I followed his voice, and I felt the room I was in was getting a little chilly. I thought I had seen shadows moving, but had chalked it up to the tricky lighting of my flashlight. When I got to Sam, he was in a separate room behind a heavy metal door. What we were looking at was disturbing. It was like some weird cross between a BDSM party room and some kind of shrine. I let out a whistle, my discomfort forgotten as I absorbed the scandalousness of it all. This was out there. Red walls, leather suits hanging on hooks, candles with weird-looking statues. There was a strange sort of altar. It looked like it had a brass frame, and there was a red cloth over it, though it was dusty and torn. There was one particular idol on it that looked to be 4 people intertwined in an act of debauchery and torture. The wax figures were melded together to create the gruesome figurine. I had never seen anything like it before, and that foreignness made it all the more unsettling. This was not something you recognize from the movies or folklore, which made it seem all the more real and yet strange. Each pale face on the idol was a mixture of horror, agony, and something else. Maybe pleasure. What the hell? I said in a low tone. I felt the overwhelming urge to turn the light on. We normally did not turn on lights for obvious reasons, but we were still in the basement, and being seen was not likely anyway, given the house's relative seclusion. I went to feel for a light switch and found one. I flicked it, but it would not go on. It clicked again and again, but I wasn't getting any juice. "Do you know if the electricity is still on here?" I asked. Sam shrugged. "You know we should not be doing that. Come on." For the first time in his voice, he didn't sound like everything was a joke. A few seconds after was when I heard something in the corner of the room. A thump. We both turned to point our flashlights at the source of the sound, but there was nothing. I remember asking, "This is a hell of a thing to show on the open house, I bet." But I knew this room was not meant to be seen yet by any prospective buyers. "Yeah, let's get this done," he said. Even despite the creepy sound, whatever went on down here was probably not anything we wanted to know too much about, or stick around too long to be introduced to it. It occurred to me that if the owner came home, we might be in deeper trouble than we ever imagined. I wanted to get it over with and get out, not end up as some weirdo sacrificial gimp in their secret velvet magic dungeon. We checked out the basement and found some power tools we could sell, putting them near the stairs that led out. I was focusing hard on looking and quickly moving the goods, ignoring the growing anxiety in the back of my brain. A rattling of the cage of my mind, the cage that stops us from acknowledging what we do not see. I wanted to get out of the basement, but I didn't want to venture into the rest of the house alone. "Want to help me check out the upstairs?" I asked Sam, trying to keep the apprehension out of my voice. Maybe Sam was not as brave as I was giving him credit for, because he seemed very keen on the idea. We walked up the stairs a bit more quickly than we normally did, and found the door was locked from the other side, which was also pretty odd. Someone could easily end up locked in the basement, with the cellar being bolted on the outside, and the door leading to the first floor also being locked from the outside. It was becoming apparent that this seemed to be the point, to keep someone from getting out of the basement. Sam cursed, remarking that it might take a while, and asked me to hold the flashlight while he messed with the lock. I did, and felt more and more unsettled, more vulnerable as he worked and fumbled with the metal. I kept seeing little signs of movement in the darkness surrounding us, but ignored them. I thought I heard something in the faint shadows, but it was hard to tell with my partner in crime messing around with the lock. He got it open after what seemed like must have been at least 20 minutes, and the door creaked open all too slowly and all too loudly. We both went into the house proper and found ourselves in the kitchen. This was the rough part. We knew we had to split up. Sam said he would take the lower floor. He told me to take the upper floor. For some reason, this irked me, like he gave me the shit job. I didn't want to put that much distance between me and the exit, but he was the brains of the operation. I got to the stairs, and they were very steep. Wood, with a narrow wall heading up. The stairs went up into a yawning abyss. An abyss I would rather do anything else other than go into. I went up, one step at a time, carefully. The stairs seemed to go on a bit longer than they should, and I kept the flashlight on the ground to guide my footing, as if the stairs seemed designed to easily trip someone up. I was afraid to point it into the shadows that waited at the top of the stairs, but when I finally started getting to the summit, I had no choice, and the light I was shining found itself only piercing the darkness to a shallow degree. I remember thinking I had never been in a house so pitch dark before. I heard Sam messing about downstairs, moving stuff, as I went into the upstairs hall. There were a series of doors, and all of them closed. With the feeling of dread I had, the thought of opening each one at a time was torture. I was about to start with door number 1 when I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. I turned around fast as hell and was relieved to see Sam. It was slim pickings downstairs apparently, so he had come up to help me handle the upstairs. I was extremely happy about it, but didn't show it. I just felt a little bit more courage than I had previously. Then the image of the sick little doll thing on the altar flashed in my mind. Yeah, I wanted to get the hell out of here. Door number 1 was as dark as the rest of the house. It looked like an office, and there was a laptop which I quickly grabbed, as I had to ignore the feeling of being watched. I had done a few jobs like this, but I had never experienced this level of anxiety, not even on my first one. I took the laptop while Sam rustled around and told him what my haul was. He asked if I had found anything else, and I said nothing valuable. But to be honest, I hadn't really looked all that hard. I just wanted to get out of here. I couldn't get that room in the basement out of my head. I asked Sam what he had found, but he was not answering, which both irritated and bothered me. "Sam!" I hissed. "Sam!" His voice came out again. "Dude, there's another weird room in here." I cursed under my breath and went in. It was like the one downstairs, but not quite as ritualized. There were a bunch of weird little idols strewn along with candles, and a bookshelf with all sorts of occult type stuff. I had seen enough. Door number 2 was disturbing, but not as bad as the basement. Sam, however, seemed more amused than he ever had been with the first one. "This guy is one sick puppy. Alright, go back downstairs and do a quick once-over, and let's get the hell out of here." I was happy to hear that, and didn't need telling twice, though I was not happy with separating at the time. I went downstairs and looked around with my flashlight, seeing that there was an old heavy TV, the kind that most people had not used in about 20 years. It wasn't worth taking, but I remember thinking it was strange they were still using such primitive stuff. I looked around a bit longer, going through some drawers. There were some things I might have taken for personal use under normal circumstances, but I wanted nothing to do with this place, much less wanting to take a piece of it home with me. I kept checking around, and that's when I saw it. The same statue that had been in the basement. The figure of the 4 intertwined bodies bound into the unspeakable or unknowable act. There was hunger, lust, agony, bliss. I wondered how anyone could make one of these abominations, much less 2. I went to the basement to start bringing some of the stuff out of the house, and I couldn't help but take another look at the weird room. That's when I noticed that the figurine was no longer on the altar. I remember an icy fist grasping my heart, and I turned on my walkie. The static hit me as I went on the channel. We both used walkie-talkies in case we ever got caught. They could not track our conversations or locations via cell phone. "Sam," I hissed. "Sam, Did you move that sick-looking figurine upstairs? There was nothing but static. I continued calling into the walkie-talkie. Just static. I tried once more. Sam, answer, damn it! The static turned.
Sam's with us now.
A voice whispered. That icy fist on my heart. It clenched harder. Who is this? The static returned and I heard what I thought was a short chuckle. A voice came in once more, and was deeper and far harsher, almost guttural. The word inhuman comes to mind. It was different than the last voice.
Come see.
I cursed hard and felt the overwhelming urge to drop the walkie, to throw it at the wall the same way one might throw a bug that had crawled on their hand. It invoked revulsion. The walkie was a bridge between me and whatever was on the other side of that channel, and more importantly, what was lurking upstairs. I was worried about Sam, very worried. I was scared for myself too, but I was not going to just leave him here. A thought occurred to me that this was a trick, a joke, but this was not the time for games, and even if it was one hell of a feat to pull something off like this. No, it didn't make sense. This was not a joke. I was torn between a sense of urgency in helping my friend, and the dread of staying in this house and going further into it. I stilled myself as best as I could, and decided if I had to do it, I was gonna be fast. And I ran up the stairs like a bat out of hell, into the kitchen and back towards the other narrow set of stairs that led upstairs to the second floor. I could hear banging on the walls, scratches. It was like the entire house was coming to life. I tried to ignore it, but it was damn near impossible, and it was all I could do to not piss myself and take off right then and there. Sam be damned, metaphorically and literally. I made it to the foot of the stairs. The darkness at the top was encroaching further down, invading beyond its borders almost aggressively. The darkness was getting more dense, getting deeper. Sam! I called up into the darkness. I could not bring myself to walk up those steps and into the pitch black. I was starting to panic. I saw a shape at the top of the steps. It was a mass, and at first, I could not make it out in the darkness, but as it got closer, it became more clear. The lack of visibility didn't matter, because I was not seeing whatever this was with my eyes. The only way I could describe it was, I was seeing it with my soul. It was the figurine, only life-size now. The four writhing bodies bound together, melted as if their skin was made of wax, limbs intertwining. As they flailed and the abomination crawled slowly down the stairs, I could hear my heart beating in my head. The scratching, the knocking, it all stopped as if in reverence for what was now coming down those stairs to meet me. Its footsteps uneven from the extra limbs. The deliberate shuffle began as it navigated its way down the path, coming down to me, its other limbs stretching out as if embracing me, beckoning me into the hell of its existence. One of the faces turned to look at me, twisted in the rictus of a dozen sensations, lost in equal parts bliss, terror, and torment. It was Sam. I ran. When I did, the noise of the house erupted again, everything banging, and there was a shrieking sound reverberating from the walls that echoed across it, sounding like dozens of separate voices, each one distinct. There was accusation in those shrieks, anger, hunger. The house was pissed, but it was also hungry. The shrieks became guttural like a pack of dogs. Then they yowled like a bunch of cats having sex. I ran for the basement, but the door slammed shut, and I tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge an inch. I could hear the uneven sounds of the abomination coming down, step by step. Then I heard a louder crash. It sounded like it had thrown itself down the steps. It wanted me that bad. It was not wasting time like some horror movie monster trying to build suspense. It was not trying to scare me. It was trying to take me. I thought I heard Sam's voice weeping. It hurts so good. It hurts so damn good, buddy. Come and get some of this. I screamed, and pulled with all my might, and the door finally unjammed and I headed down the stairs, tripping halfway down and hitting the ground. I felt pain in my temple and was bleeding, but I didn't care. I was up again in an instant and going out of the cellar door. On my way out, I felt something reach out of the weird room, groping from my neck, clammy and vice-like. It tore my hoodie but slipped as I ran out into the moisture of the night. I didn't care about the goods. I didn't care about anything other than getting as much distance from me in this place as I could. Luckily, TC's piece of shit van didn't need a key and was turned on via screwdriver. I jumped in and fumbled for it, looking frantically in the rearview mirror. The storm was picking up now. I fumbled harder and did the trick. The van sputtered to life and I punched it out of there. I only stopped for gas once and was gripped by paranoia, thinking I saw the abomination in every dark corner. I tried to tell TC what happened, but could not really bring myself to speak of it. He was pissed he didn't make anything out of it either, and told me to lose his number. Accused me and Sam of holding out on him. I never figured out what that house was supposed to be, and I was too afraid to even look it up again to see if it had been sold. I'm thinking of doing it again, but even opening that tiny door terrifies me. The house taught me something profound in the brief time I spent in there. Not knowing was better sometimes. As for Sam, I checked desperately for any news of him being found in that town, but there was nothing. I didn't know his family, nor many of his friends, and no one came to ask me about him. Sam was prone to wander, and this was not the first time he upped and vanished, as far as everyone else was concerned. I knew what happened though. They, or it, had told me. Sam was with them now. He would always be with them.